Okay, welcome to another show and tell. This is a piece of, oh, I call it comic book art. I was in high school at the time when I did this. And I think I did this in my junior year. It doesn't have the year. Actually, it says 16 years old. So I was a junior in high school when I did this piece, and I was heavily into comic books, collecting, and comic book art at the time, and I had my favorite illustrators and inkers and so on and so forth. And so I'd spend a lot of time in my art class, which was called Art Quest, and it's a class where you were able to pretty much kind of write your own curriculum, and then you just kind of work on it all year long. And I don't know, I had worked on a few different pieces, but this one was a really significant one. You know, back then you would spend about 50 minutes a day in each one of your classes, and so by the time you kind of get set up and everything like that, you had about 45 minutes to work on whatever pieces you were working on. But this has something to do with a lot of my stamp design art, because this is kind of at the time, this was kind of the piece that kind of started developing my pen and ink style. I was into this one artist called John Byrne. He was kind of the comic book artist at the time. Any title that he worked on was kind of escalated in value just from the very fact that that was his art. But the thing that I really liked about it was the pen and ink work in this title called X-Men. You might recognize it from the movies if you're not into comic books, or if you're not into comic book movies at all. That's kind of you wouldn't have heard of that. But the guy that was inking all of his penciled work, his name was Terry Austin. And in comic book art at the time, you had to work all in line art. So if something looked kind of grayscale, it was through, maybe a series of, he worked in a lot of parallel lines like this. And there was a little bit of a stippling in here. And they call this other thing called zip tone. It's where you just kind of, there's these sheets of kind of stippled tone. I didn't use it in any of here, but it would look real consistent like something like this. So there were different values of a zip tone. Might be a 10% value and a 20% value and a 30%. But you can buy this in sheets, and you can kind of, lay it down there and kind of cut around it and whatnot. But, getting back into these things that I'm doing these days, where we're talking about kind of the oscillation of light and darks, and kind of extending the range of values, this is where it kind of started off. This comic book right here was my idea of. It was probably like the splash page. When you open a comic book, there's usually a full page drawing right there, and this is supposed to be this post-apocalyptic type of thing right here. And I put on these little references to different things that I was into at the time. This is Griffey Books right here. The K is kind of fallen down, but there was this comic book store that I used to go to called Margroff's Comic Books, in kind of in Santa Maria on the central coast of California, where I grew up. And so I don't know, I put Griffey, so it wasn't so direct. And this is, I don't know, what is it, Frank's something. I think this is R.E., so it's probably supposed to be records or something like that. And it says there's imports, tapes, video, comics, posters, records. There used to be this store up there called Cheap Thrills, and, these stores like that sold all of that type of media. And I don't know, just little things like this, little stippled types of works in here, and kind of trying to develop my skills as far as that one. This is like I don't know, some, graded fence right there. That must have been a real pain in the butt getting that in there. But I was starting to work with my technical pens at the time, which gave me the ability to go in there and to do that. You can see how small it is. Just my finger right here is my pinky finger, but all those little tiny things like that, and trying to not I don't know, have to go in there and do something with like a whiteout or anything like that. I didn't use whiteout anywhere in here, but here's these rocks down here, and that's one thing that I really pay close attention to whenever I see a rock that looks more like a sack of potatoes, like or something like that. It really kind of bugs me because I'm a real stickler for stonework and how it's supposed to look, fissures in it and whatnot. And that was, the same thing going back when, and getting things like the perspective right on things like that. I don't have it right everywhere in here, but the perspective is reasonably decent, in terms of having a, single vanishing point in here, and then kind of going from the same vanishing point down here in these areas like that. I was kind of, it was really in the learning process and whatnot, but just trying to get all these little types of elements down like that, and broken areas like that, and how kind of rocks fall and whatnot. Here's a little newspaper right here. The Los Angeles Times. Oh, I wrote Conks Take Championship right here. So I like doing all these little types of personal references. Conquistadors was the mascot for my high school. And up here I wrote, I don't know, Frederick D. Rex, 1967 to 2047, so we can kind of get an idea of, what, kind of time frame this storyline was supposed to have taken place. I didn't write a whole story. I don't think I even had a, definitive concept as far as, the rest of the story right here. I was just working on this one panel right here for some reason. I have no idea why. But anyways, this piece right here, there used to be this comic book convention that happened periodically in Los Angeles. It traveled around the country, called the Creation Comic Book and Science Fiction Convention, and they had things like this no minimum bid auction, but then they also had this art contest at every show. And I don't know, I got my, I don't know, confidence up, in order to submit this piece at one of those shows. And I think there were two, look at that, it says Alpo right there. There were two categories. There was a kids category, and then there was the adults, okay? And I think the kids category, it was like up to 12 years old or something like that. And I'm 16, and, it's open to me, against, 20 some odd year olds, 30-year-olds and whatnot. And, I always thought that's, unfair, but I entered it anyways. And one of my favorite comic books, I think it was the John Byrne show when he was a guest artist there, and he was my favorite artist. And, I don't know, I submitted it, and you saw them kind of, positioning, when you handed your artwork in, they were positioning it behind the desk, and I saw all those pieces of art that people were submitting there. A lot older than me, probably college-age guys and whatnot, and I took a look at their pieces, and I thought, oh my God, I never felt so embarrassed, And I thought, what in the world am I doing, But I already turned it in, so it was too late, and my mom already took off, from dropping. I wasn't going to carry this around all day. But anyways, it came around, for the time for the contest, kind of later on in the day, and the guest artists for the show were up there, as well as a couple other panel guys or whatever, probably that worked for the comic book convention coordinator. And I remember John Byrne taking a look at this and looking around, and and this piece happened to take second, so I don't know. I was pretty sure. I have no idea what the prize was. It was probably some gift certificate or something like that, and so I was pretty happy about that. But I had zero confidence, after I saw that other artwork up here. I have a feeling that my piece was a little bit more kind of in depth, because I'd worked on this for, months probably at the time. And I don't know, just the level of detail and, just time. The other guys, a typical comic book panel might take, I don't know, 2 or 3 days maybe or something like that. These were all, no one submitting was a professional artist or anything like that, but I was pretty happy about that and shocked. But anyways, the early stages of things like this, in terms of when I look over this, I can see my early techniques of certain types of things with the shading and line work and whatnot, and stippling. And I don't know, a lot of it kind of plays into a lot of the things that I was doing with stamp artwork and whatnot. So, anyways, stage one with pen and ink types of illustration with a technical pen. So anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And I don't know, yeah, Alpo, is that, dog food even still around anymore? No idea.